Check, check, check. Hey, shalom, everyone. Good morning. I'm back for another history in the AM. If you could type in the chat why, if you can see. So, I think we live. Right. All right. So, uh, Captain Azariah, here again with history in the AM. We delve into our history in the Bible. Um, for those that have been rocking, I'm gonna pick up where we left off last time. We went through the Assyrian captivity, we went through the Babylonian captivity. Now we're at the end of the Babylonian captivity. Last time we left off with Daniel and what was going on during the Babylonian captivity. As far as Daniel goes, and those that were in Babylon at that time. So now we're going to pick up from there in Daniel and then go to the destruction and fall of Babylon and then start with the Persian and Median captivity. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Got a lot of information here. Uh, so let's hop right into it. So just to recap um, from where we were. Um, Babylon, our people are fully in the Babylonian captivity. You still have the poor sort in Jerusalem. You still have the poor sort Jerusalem. There's still a remnant that was left in Jerusalem, but the bulk of everyone has been taken to Babylon and are in Babylon. That's what we read for with Daniel. You had Ezekiel. Jeremiah was taken captive, released and basically allowed to go where he wanted, and he decided to go back to Jerusalem. Um, and he hid the Ark of the Covenant. You have Habakkuk who's still in Babylon, who we're gonna read about again. We read about him briefly before. We're gonna read about him more in depth again uh, in regards to the Persian and Median captivity in Daniel. Um, but the bulk of us are in captivity. You had the three holy children who were delivered from fiery furnace because they refused to go against the laws of God and hearken into the commandment of the king. And now we're in Daniel, the fourth chapter, leading up to destruction and fall of Babylon. If y'all get a chance, go back and look at part one, part two, part three. Uh, More in depth information leading up to where we're at now. So, Daniel, the fourth chapter. We're going to read through this pretty quickly. Daniel, the fourth chapter, and then we're going to jump. Because when you, like I said before, when you examine the book of Daniel, um, all the chapters don't read chronologically. Um, they bounce between uh, the various captivities. Like we're going to read here in chapter 4, but then we're going to jump to chapter 7 and chapter 8, and then jump back to chapter 5, chapter 6. Because, like I said, the chapters aren't aligned chronologically. Um, so, Daniel, the fourth chapter, we're going to read through this swiftly. If y'all remember before, Daniel, the third chapter, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but that's what their names were changed to. Names were Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, were delivered from the fiery furnace, and then they were promoted in the promises of Babylon. Now you get to chapter 4, and Nebuchadnezzar has a vision, another vision and a dream, and Daniel interprets it. So we're going to read through that rather quickly, just because there's some good history and key parts in there. All right, so Daniel the chapter 4 and verse 1. It says, Nebuchadnezzar, the king, unto all people, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. I thought it good to show the signs and wonders that the high God hath wrought towards me. How great are his signs, and how mighty are his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in mine house and flourished in my palace. And I saw a dream which made me afraid, and the thoughts upon my bed and the visions of my head troubled me. Therefore made I a decree to bring all the wise men of Babylon before me. They may make known unto me the interpretation of the dream. So he's going back to chapter 2, where he had the vision and dream um, of that Daniel interpreted. None of the soothsayers or the Chaldeans could make known, the quote unquote wise men of Babylon could make known the dream. So he's going back to that, making reference to that because he has another vision. Verse 7, it says, then came in the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. And I told them, and I told the dream before them. They did not make known unto me the interpretation thereof. But at the last, Daniel came in before. His name was Belteshazzar, according to the name of my God, in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And before him I told the dream, saying, O Belteshazzar, master of the magicians, because I know the spirit of the holy gods is in thee, and no secret troubleth thee. Tell me the visions of my dream that I have seen and the interpretation thereof. So now he goes into the vision, into the dream that he had. Um, verse 10. Thus were the visions of mine head and my bed. I saw and behold a tree in the midst of the earth, and a height thereof was great. So in this vision, we're not gonna read the whole thing. In this vision, in this dream, he sees a tree uh that came up out of the midst of the earth, and the height was basically a very large tree. And as you read on, it tells you the leaves were fair. The beasts of the field hid their shadow under it. Um, and then there was a holy one come from heaven and hewed down the tree, and then placed bands of iron and brass upon in the tender of the grass of the field, uh, things of that nature. He basically sees a tree that gets hewed down. We're gonna jump down to verse 17. When you get a chance, read through it. When we're gonna jump down to verse 17. Matter of fact, we'll continue on. Verse 12. It says, the leaves thereof were fair, and the fruit thereof much, and in it was meat for all. The beasts of the field had shadow under it, and the fowls of heaven dwelt in the boughs thereof, and all the flesh was fed of it. I saw in the vision of my head upon my bed, and behold, a watcher, and the Holy One came down from heaven, cried aloud, and said thus, hew down the tree, and cut off his branches, and shake off his leaves, and scatter his fruit. The beasts get away from under it, and the fowls from his branches. Nevertheless, leave the stump of his root in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass, the tender of grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of heaven. Let his portion be the beast with the beast in the grass of the earth. Let his heart be changed from a man's, and let a beast heart be given unto him. And let 7 times pass over him. Verse 17. This matter is by the decree of the watchers, and the demand by the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he wilt, and set it up over it the basis of men. So he got this vision that he received was to show that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and he puts over it whom he will, and set up over it the basis of men. Now watch this. Verse 18, it says, this dream I, King Nebuchadnezzar, have seen. Now thou, O Belteshazzar, declare the interpretation thereof. For as much as all the wise men of my kingdom are not able to make known unto me the interpretation, but thou art able. The spirit of the holy gods is in thee. So he understood that Daniel had the Holy Spirit on him and was able to interpret dreams and things of that nature. He knew that the Chaldeans, the soothsayers, and magicians couldn't because it wasn't no different than the last time. So he brought Daniel in there to give him the interpretation and the understanding of this vision. Watch this. Let's jump to verse 24. Verse 24. And as you read on, he goes into the vision and explains uh, how the tree was, he was the tree that I was talking about. But let's jump down to verse 24. This is the interpretation, O king. This is the decree of the Most High, which is come upon my Lord the king, that they shall drive thee from men, and thy dwelling shall be the beasts of the field. And they shall make thee to eat eat grass as oxen. They shall wet thee with the dew of heaven. 7 times shall pass over thee, till thou know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will. That was the whole point of the vision, to show that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, and He gives it to whoever He will. And the same is true today. The the Most High, He's moving these nations around, like chess pieces, so that His will be done. Matter of fact, let's get an example of that. We read it before during the Assyrian captivity, but let's go back to it. I'm going to read it real briefly. Second King. Um, Second Kings 23. It's just an example of the Most High ruling in the kingdom. He set up upon it whom he will. Second Kings 23 and good Kings, or it might be yes. Let's go to Chronicles. Chronicles. Same history in Second Kings 23. It's Chronicles, I believe. Goes into a little more detail. Let's see, Second Chronicles 34. And second. Give it 1 second. Second. I'm looking for it. Second Chronicles 35. Uh, yeah, Second Chronicles 35. And let's start at verse 20. So, uh, this history we're going back to was of King Josiah, who was a righteous king in the sight of the Lord. But how his death happened, he was going to make war with Pharaoh Nechoh, the king of Egypt. But Pharaoh Nechoh told him, "This ain't your battle. This ain't your fight." So watch it. Second Chronicles 35, verse 20. It says, after all this, when Josiah had prepared the temple, Necho, king of Egypt, came up to fight against Carchemish by Euphrates, and Josiah went out against him. When you look at the battle of Carchemish, which was what was happening amongst the nations, you had Egypt, you had Assyria, you had the Persians and Medes, and Babylon that was basically fighting for power, and essentially Assyria. This was a pivotal point in history where the Assyrians retained power and eventually came into power. No, no, no. The Babylonians, the Syrians were ruling at this time, but this was a pivotal point where the Babylonians made headway to essentially come into power. As you read on, the Babylonians eventually came and took over and became that ruling superpower This was a pivotal point in the war amongst the nations warring to where Babylon made an advance to eventually become that superpower. Same thing you look at today with war and certain things. There was pivotal battles that helped countries gain power, and this essentially was one of them. When you examine history, so it says Second Chronicles 35:20. It says after all this, Josiah had prepared the temple. Necho, king of Egypt, came up to fight against Carchemish at Euphrates, and Josiah went out against him. And you read in Kings, that's where he went out against him. The king of Egypt was headed to Carchemish for the battle, and Josiah met him in Megiddo to basically battle against him. But watch what he says, verse 21. But he sent ambassadors to him. That he is talking about Necho sent ambassadors to Josiah. But he sent ambassadors to him, saying, what have I to do with thee, thou king of Judah? I come not against thee this day, but against the house wherewith I have war. For God commanded me to make haste. Forbear thee from meddling with God, who is with me, that he destroy thee not. So he sent ambassadors to Josiah, basically saying, hey, listen, my fight ain't with you right now. I have my own mission right now. God has sent me uh, to go and make war, to go to Carchemish to battle and to fight. My fight ain't with you. So refrain from meddling with God, because He's with me and He will destroy thee. So don't meddle, so He don't destroy you not. And as you read on, Josiah went ahead and continued with the battle, and he eventually was killed in the battle. So point with that was showing that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men. The Most High uses these nations as He wilt for His will. So now let's go back to Daniel 4. And where do we leave off? Verse 26. Daniel 4 and 26. It says, whereas they commanded to leave the stump of the tree roots, thy kingdom shall be sure unto thee. After that, thou shalt have known that the heavens do rule. So his Nebuchadnezzar wouldn't fully leave his kingdom. The kingdom will still be sure, but he would be brought low and cast out of his kingdom for a time, so that he can know that the heavens do rule. The Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men. Verse 27. Wherefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable unto thee. Break off thy sins by righteousness, thine iniquities by showing mercy to the poor. If it may be a lengthening of thy tranquility. So Daniel's letting them know, like, listen, lead off from thy sins and thy iniquities, and how you do that is by showing mercy to the poor. Who's the poor? He was talking about the Israelites. Those Israelites that was taken captivity. That's what he's telling them. Show mercy unto the poor. Uh, if it may be lengthened of thy tranquility. All this came upon King Nebuchadnezzar. Watch this. Let's prove that. He says the poor. I can see the Christian thought right now. The poor is talking about everybody. Oh, the poor of all Israel. Let's get Isaiah. All people. That's the poor. Everyone's poor. Let's see what Daniel was saying. Isaiah 14 and verse 32. Watch this to explain the poor. It says, what shall one then answer the messengers of the nation? That the Lord hath founded Zion, and the poor of his people shall trust in it. So the poor is talking about Zion. This goes back to Matthew 5, where Christ said, blessed are the poor in spirit. That poor is talking about the Israelites. So now, when you go back to Daniel 4, what Daniel is letting Nebuchadnezzar know to lengthen thy tranquility, leave off from thine iniquities by showing mercy unto the poor, unto the Israelites, those that were scattered throughout his kingdom. So watch this, verse 20, back to Daniel 4 and 28. It says, all this came upon the king of Nebuchadnezzar. At the end of the 12 months, he walked in the palace of the kingdom of Babylon. King spake and said, is this not great Babylon? So all of that, the vision was shown, the interpretation, but in his mind, he's still. That's why the Lord humbled him to let him know you don't rule none of this. He says the king's verse 30, the king spake and said, is not this great Babylon that I have built for the house of the kingdom by the might of my power and for the honor of my majesty? Verse 31, while the word was in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven saying, O King Nebuchadnezzar, to thee it is spoken. The kingdom is departed from thee. He's like, just like it was spoken, the kingdom's departed. As he was sitting there boasting about how he got this kingdom by his power, a voice came from heaven basically saying, your kingdom is departed from thee. Verse 32, and they shall drive thee from men, and thy dwelling shall be the beast of the field, and they shall make thee to eat grass as oxen, and 7 times shall pass over thee, till thou know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will. The same hour was the thing fulfilled upon Nebuchadnezzar. And he was driven from men and did eat grass as oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hairs were grown like eagle's feathers, his nails like bird's claws. Basically, he was brought down to, he was basically made base like an animal. He was cast out. He ate grass like an ox, and basically his body was wet with the dew of heaven. Why? Because he was in the grass like an animal. Uh, his hair grown out, his nails grown out. Basically, he was cast out. He was as a beast. Verse 34. At the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up mine eyes unto heaven, and mine understanding returned unto me. Because remember, in the vision, it says that he would, when you read, what was that, verse 16, it says, let his heart be changed from man's, and let a beast heart be given unto them. He had the mind of an animal, a beast. He was a savage, a freaking based beast. That's where we're reading here in verse 34. It says, and at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up mine eyes unto heaven, and mine understanding returned unto me. I blessed the Most High. I praised and honored him that liveth forever, whose dominion is an everlasting dominion. His kingdom is from generation to generation. And all the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing. And he doeth according to his will in the army of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth, and none can stand his hand, or say unto him, what doest thou? Excuse me. And that's heavy right there, verse 35. It says, and Nebuchadnezzar was brought base to understand that Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men. It says, and all the inhabitants of the earth are imputed as nothing. He doeth according to his will the army of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth. Watch this. Let's jump over to, let me get it real quick. Daniel, the 10th chapter, in verse 12, where he talks about he doeth as he will in the army of heaven, and in the inhabitants of earth. You also read in Second Maccabees where it talks about they saw strange apparitions and they prayed that it would go well for them, because just like there's wars on earth, there's wars in heaven that dictate what goes on the earth. Watch this. Let's get it. Daniel 10 and verse 12. It says, then said unto me, fear not, Daniel. For from the first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand and to chasten thyself before thy God, thy words were heard, and I am come for thy words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 1 and 20 days. But lo, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, and I remained there with the king of Persia. Watch this. Let's get Second Maccabees. Second Maccabees 5, real quick. Saying going into the same thing. And what Nebuchadnezzar is basically got brought low and abased, and God caused him to understand this. Second Maccabees 5 and verse 1. About the time came Antiochus, prepared his second voyage into Egypt. And then it happened that throughout all the city, for the space of almost of 40 days, there was seen horsemen running in the air and cloth of gold, and armed with lances, like a band of soldiers, and troops of horsemen in array, encountering and running one against the other, with shaking of shields and multitude of pikes, and drawing swords and casting of darts, and the glittering of golden ornaments and harness of all sorts. So there was a battle, a war that everyone's seen in heaven. And watch this, verse 4. Wherefore every man prayed that the apparition might turn to good. Why? Because they already knew once that battle was open, they prayed that it would turn to good for them. That's what Nebuchadnezzar's going into, where he says, back to Daniel 4 and 35. It says, and all the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing, and he doeth according to his will in the armies of heaven. There's certain battles that happen in the heaven that dictate the tide and turn of kingdoms on this earth. That's what we read in Daniel 10. That's what we read in Second Maccabees. That's why everyone prayed that the apparition would turn to good for them. So now watch this, verse 35 again. And all the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing, and he doeth according to his will in the army of heaven, and among the inhabitants of the earth, and none can stay his hand, or say unto him, what doest thou? Verse 36. At, at the same time, my reason returned unto me. And for the glory of my kingdom, mine honor and brightness was returned unto me. That was that stump that he saw in a vision, that his kingdom wouldn't be completely uprooted from him. It says, mine honor and brightness returned unto me. My counselors and my lords sought unto me. And I was established in my kingdom, and excellency, and excellent majesty was added unto me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, who all whose works are true, and his ways judgment, and those that walk in pride he is able to abase. So he was humble. Because remember, in the beginning of the chapter, he was referring to the spirit that was on Daniel, the spirit of the holy gods. He was still dealing with what he understood as his gods. But when he was humbled and abased, you see his verbiage changed. And it was the King of heaven and the most high God, showing you that there is only one. There is no holy gods. There's God. And he's able to abase those that walk in pride. So now with that, let's jump over to Daniel, the 7th chapter. So Nebuchadnezzar was humbled, he was made low, he was made a base, or restored his kingdom again. Now let's go over to Daniel the 7th chapter. So during the Babylonian captivity, you had, after Nebuchadnezzar, you read in the scriptures Nebuchadnezzar, and then it jumps to Belshazzar, but you had a king in between there. Uh uh let me pull it up so I don't say the name wrong. Uh, Terrible with this. Um, Give me 1 second. So, all right. You had, after Nebuchadnezzar, you had uh you had evil Merodach. Because remember, Nebuchadnezzar was brought low. He was based. So you had other people that stepped into his steed of the kings before Belshazzar. Belshazzar was the last king that you read about uh during the Babylonian captivity. But you had other kings like Evil Merodach, uh Nerog Glassliar, which was his brother-in-law. I know I butchered that. Nebo then leading up to Belshazzar. Um Now, the Nebuchadnezzar you read in Judith is not the same Nebuchadnezzar you read here. We're going to touch on that later in Persian and captivity. But watch this. Let's jump to chapter 7, verse 1. So it says, in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. So as you read, like I said, when you're reading through Daniel, you'll read it a jump from Nebuchadnezzar, read about the Persian kings, and then it'll jump to Belshazzar. There were kings that ruled between Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar. During that space, what we just read in chapter 4, where he was made a base, and even after his passing, you had other kings that ruled up to Belshazzar. But chapter 7 was the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon. Daniel had a vision, he had a dream. Uh, Verse 2. It says, Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of the heaven strove upon the great sea, and and four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. It says the first was like a lion, it had eagle's wings. Oh, the first was like excuse me. It says the verse chapter 4. Verse 4. It says the first was like a lion, it had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. So this first beast that you're reading about, that was like a lion and had eagle's wings, was Babylon. The eagle's wings goes into its rulership, how it basically overthrew and took everyone captive. Because when you read Assyrian, the Assyrian didn't have the whole world under it, meaning it wasn't the superclass. Because remember, we still had the Southern Kingdom in Israel that hadn't been taken captive yet. But you'd be listening. Um, but when Babylon came, it took everyone, all nations, kingdoms, and tongue. That's what you read in Jeremiah. Watch this. Hold that real quick. Talks about the eagle's wings going into its rulership. Jeremiah 30. Give me one second. Let me find it. Where is that at? Real quick. Jeremiah. Mm-mm. Was it 27? Yeah, Jeremiah 27, not 37. Jeremiah 27, real quick, verse 1. It says, in the beginning of the reign of Jehoiakim, Josiah, king of Judah, came the word of Jeremiah from the Lord, saying, thus saith the Lord unto me, make thee bonds and yokes, and put them upon thy neck. Send them to the king of Edom, and to the king of Moab, and to the king of Ammonites, and to the king of Tyrus, and to the king of Sidon, by the hand of the messengers which come to Jerusalem unto Zedekiah king of Judah. And command them to say unto their masters, thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, thus say ye to your masters, I have made the earth and the man and the beast that are upon the ground, and my great power, and by my outstretched arm, and give it to whom it seemed meet unto me. Same thing we read in Daniel. uh Verse 6. And now have I given all the lands unto the hand of Nebuchadnezzar the king of Babylon my servant. The beasts of the field have I given him also to serve him, and all nations shall serve him, and his son and his son's sons, until the very time of his land come. And then many nations and great kings shall serve themselves of him. So that's where it's going to. We go back to Daniel 7, verse 4. It says, the first was like a lion, and it had eagle's wings. And I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made to stand upon his feet as a man, and a man's heart was given into him. That man's heart is going to Daniel, the understanding that he had because of Daniel. Because remember, Nebuchadnezzar had many dreams, he had many certain visions, and Daniel was the one interpreting. Daniel was that heart that is talking about, of the understanding that we had. That's why when you get to chapter 4, he called Daniel, because he understood he had the understanding, and the spirit of God was upon him. Now, chapter 5, verse 5, it says, and behold, another beast, a second, like unto a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had three ribs in the mouth of it between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. So now, this second beast we're reading in verse 5 is going into Persia. Persians and the Median Empire. The Persian Median Empire, the Medo-Persian Empire is sometimes how you might read it, because of how it came to into play. Because it was two kingdoms, two separate kingdoms that came together, and then eventually it all encompassed the Persian captivity. I mean, the Persian kingdom, which we went captive into. So watch this. It says, And behold, another beast like unto a bear, and it raised up on one side. That raised up on one side is going into that Persian Empire, basically raising up as the superior empire, because it was a two-pronged kingdom. It was two kingdoms coming together and raising up on one side, meaning one kingdom became greater than the other. Uh, and then it says it had three ribs in the mouth of it between the teeth of it. Those three ribs, let's go to Isaiah real quick. Chapter 45 to explain the three ribs. Isaiah 45. Uh Isaiah 45 and started. Matter of fact, we're gonna jump up. Isaiah 44 and verse 24. Um, because this kingdom we're reading about is the Persian kingdom. And they were prophesied to by, and matter of fact, Cyrus was named by name to be ruler in this kingdom. So let's start at Isaiah 44 in verse 24. It says, Thus saith the Lord, thy Redeemer, and he that formed thee from the womb. I am the Lord that maketh all things, that stretcheth forth the heavens alone, that spreadeth abroad the earth by myself, that frustrateth the tokens of the liars, maketh diviners mad, that turneth wise men backward, maketh their knowledge foolish, that confirmeth the word of his servant, and performeth the counsel of his messengers, that saith to Jerusalem, Thou shalt be inhabited, and to be the cities of Judah. Ye shall be built, and I will raise up the decayed places, that saith to the deep, Be dry. I will dry up thy rivers. Thus saith of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, shall perform all my pleasure. Even saying to Jerusalem, Thou shalt be built, and to the temple thy foundation shall be laid. Watch this. Chapter 45, verse 1. Thus saith the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have holden, to subdue nations before him. And I will loose the loins of kings, to open before him the two leaving gates, and the gates shall not be shut. I will go before thee and make the crooked places straight. I will break in pieces the gates of brass and cut in sunder the bars of iron. So Cyrus was already prophesied to rule up. Why? Because he would release us to be able to go back and build the temple. We get that. We'll go into that as we get into the Persian captivity. Let's jump down to verse 14. Isaiah 45 and 14 explains what those three ribs were for Persia. But we started up here to show you it's talking about Persia, Cyrus in particular. Isaiah 45, verse 14. Thus saith the Lord, the labor of Egypt, the merchandise of Ethiopia, and of the Sabians, men of stature, shall come over unto thee. They shall be thine. They shall come after thee. In chains they shall come over, and they shall fall down unto thee. They shall make supplication unto thee, saying, Surely God is in thee, and there is none else. There is no God. So those three ribs were Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sabian. So now let's go back to Daniel. Daniel 7th chapter. Let's read verse 5 again. It says, And behold, another beast Another beast, excuse me, verse 5. And behold, another beast, a second, like unto a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had three ribs in its mouth. It had three ribs in the mouth of it between the teeth of it. And they said unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. So watch this. Let's jump over to chapter 8. As you read on in chapter 7, which we're going to come back and touch it as we get into other captivities, it's going into the other kingdoms uh, that would be set up after Persia. Because when you read chapter 7, this is the times of the Gentiles. Bishop went into it last Sabbath in brief, going into Esau's kingdom, and touch it again as we get to that captivity. So watch this. But chapter 7, verse 5 is going into Persia. Now let's jump over to chapter 8. Because that raised up on one side is going into that two-pronged government. Read the chapter. When you get to chapter 8, Daniel has another vision going into Persia. Chapter 8, we're going to start at Daniel chapter 8, verse 1. In the third year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me, Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the first. At the first was chapter 7. I saw in the vision, and it came to pass when I saw, I would that I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the provinces of Elam, and I was by the river of Beulah. Watch this. Let's go to Genesis, the 10th chapter, where it talks about Shushan and Elam. Because essentially, those are the Persians, and those were modern day. That was the nation and race of Persians, Elam. So watch this. Let's go to Genesis 10 real quick, just to read about it. And those would be watch this, Genesis the 10th chapter. I'm gonna start at verse 22. It says, children of Shem, Elam, and Ashur, Arphaxad, and Lud, and Aram. So those Persians and Medes were Shemitic people, like the term they would be Shemites, who descend from Elam, who are modern day East Indians, things of that nature. That would be the Persian or Elam people, and that's what we're reading in Daniel, where he said he saw a vision in the palaces of Shushan, which would be Iran today. The Iranian people, East Indian people, that would be Elam. So let's go back. Let's go back to chapter 8 and verse 2 again. It says, And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass, when I saw that I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. I saw in a vision, I was by the river of Ulai. Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had two horns. So this ram that had two horns represents the Persian and Median empires. One horn was Persia, one horn was Media. And in the beginning of their reign, the Median Empire was the stronger empire. But Persia eventually rose up, as we're going to read in chapter 8, and it just became the Persian Empire. And that's what you read throughout history. That's why it's always known as the Persian Empire. And you don't really read throughout history too much of the Median portion of it. So watch this. Verse 3 again. It says, Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had two horns, and the two horns were high, but one was higher than the other. The higher came up last. That's what it's talking about. He says he saw two horns that were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last because it started as the Medo Persian Empire. Because as we read who overthrown Babylon, it was actually the Median kingdom that overthrew Babylon and established a kingdom. But the one that was higher was Persia, but it came up last, meaning later. It came up later to be the mightier kingdom, and eventually all the empires was compassed under, and it was the Persia. So verse 4. It says, "And I saw the ram pushing eastward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him. Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, but he did according to his will and became great." Uh, that's the Medes and the Persian, uh, which is Elam. I like we said before, it was Iran. Those East Indians, that is Elam, those Persians and Medes. Watch this. Let's go to Tobit. 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 We read this before during the fall of Babylon. Let's go read. I mean, during the fall of Assyria. Let's read it again. Tobit 14. And we're going to start at verse 15. It says, "But before he died, he heard of the destruction of Nineveh, which was taken by Nebuchadnezzar and Ahasuerus. And before his death, he rejoiced in Nineveh." Um, that Ahasuerus, he was a Persian. He was of the Persian and Mede Empire. Because what you're going to examine with history, there was a relationship between Babylon and the Persians, because they helped Babylon overthrow the Assyrians. That goes back to 2 Kings 23, where we read about the battle of Carchemish, where the Egyptians was going to help fight. Persia was there also. Uh, Now leading up all the way to where Persia overthrows Babylon, and we'll read that in a second in Daniel chapter 6. So let's go back to Daniel 8, real quick. Daniel 8 and 4 again, where it says, "And I saw a ram pushing eastward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him. Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand. But he did according to his will and became great." Uh, and that is this Medo-Persian Empire, also known as the Alchemedian Empire. When you look at history, when you're researching history, things of that nature, they are under different names. But these are those two horns that we are reading about. Watch this. Verse 5. "And as I considered, behold, an he goat came forth from the east on the face of the whole earth and touched not the ground. The goat had a notable horn in his eyes." That's going into Greece, and we'll touch that later. But watch this. I want to jump down to verse 20, because Daniel did expound on what those two horns were. Daniel 8 and 20. It says, "The ram which thou sawest, having two horns, are the kings of Media and Persia." Showing you that this ram that had two horns represented the Median. So now let's go to Daniel the sixth. No, Daniel chapter 5. Daniel the fifth chapter. And let's start at verse 1. It said, because this vision we just read happened during the third year. We read the first vision in chapter 7, which was during the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon. Then we got to chapter 8, which was the third year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon. Now we're going to get to chapter 5. Belshazzar is still ruling, and ultimately, chapter 5 is the fall of Babylon and the institution of the Medo-Persian and Persian and Median kingdom. Daniel 5, verse 1. It says, "Belshazzar, the king, made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before the thousands. Belshazzar, whilst he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives and concubines might drink therein. Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which was at Jerusalem, and the king and his princes and his wives and his concubines drank in them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and of silver and of brass and of iron and of stone. So he commanded all the vessels that was taken out of Jerusalem to be brought in so that they could drink wine and get drunk and merry and basically drink to praise the gods of idols. That's the gold and the silver and of brass and of iron. Excuse me. That basically he commanded to have that taken out to basically drink to those idols. Watch this, verse 5. In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand and wrote over against the candlestick on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. The king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's countenance was changed, and he was troubled. His thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one to another. Man, he was terrified. Boy. Countenance changed, man. He was afraid. He was scared to the point he peed on himself. That's what it's talking about, where it says where his joints of his loins were loose. Because think about it. You sit there, you drinking, they drinking, merry, praising they freaking idols, and then you see a hand, you see some fingers. You see fingers of a man's hands go over to a start right over on the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall. You see some fingers start writing on a wall. He got terrified to the point he peed on himself. Verse 7. It says the king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers and the Chaldeans and the soothsayers. So now he frantic. Hey, bring the magicians, the soothsayers, the Chaldeans in here. They're going to have to come explain this something. We got fingers writing on the wall. Uh it says, and the king spake and said unto the wise men of Babylon, whosoever shall read this writing and show me the interpretation thereof shall be clothed with scarlet and have a chain of gold about his neck and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. And whoever can tell me the interpretation of this writing, I'm going to bless you with all scarlet and gold. You're going to be the third ruler in the kingdom. Watch this, verse 8. It says, then came in, then came in, verse 8. It says, then came in the king's wise men, but they could not read the writing, nor make known the king the interpretation thereof. Then was King Belshazzar greatly troubled. His countenance was changed in him, and his lords were astonished. He was terrified to the point where his subjects was looking at him. They were astonished, like the king, he tripping. Watch this, verse 10. Now the queen, by reason of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banquet house, and the queen spake and said, O king, live forever. Let not thy thoughts trouble thee, or let thy countenance be charged. There is a man in thy kingdom, in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And in the days of thy father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, was found in him, whom the king Nebuchadnezzar thy father, the king, I say, thy father, made made master of the magicians and astrologers and Chaldeans and soothsayers, for as much as an excellent spirit and knowledge and understanding, interpreting of dreams and showing of hard sentences and the solving of doubts were found in the same Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will show thee the interpretation. So she came in here with some sense and was like, hey, go get Daniel. Your father made him uh ruler of all soothsayers and astrologers, and in him is the spirit of understanding to be able to resolve hard sentences, interpret dreams, things of that nature. Verse 13. Then was Daniel brought in before the king, and the king spake and said unto Daniel, art thou that Daniel, which art of the children of the captivity of Judah, whom the king my father brought out of Jewry? I have even heard of thee that the spirit of the gods is in thee, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom is found in thee, And now the wise men, the astrologers, have brought in before me, that they should read this writing and make known unto me the interpretation thereof. They could not show the interpretation of the and I have heard of thee that thou canst make interpretation and dissolve doubts. Now, if thou canst read the writing and make known to me the interpretation thereof, thou shalt be clothed with scarlet and have a chain of gold about thy neck, and shalt be the third ruler in the kingdom. This right here lets you know, as and similar to what happened to Joseph. Um, where you read in Exodus how Joseph was second in the kingdom, but as time went on, other kings were rulers. They didn't remember nor acknowledge Joseph's status. And this even goes to many, even us in this captivity today. Just a sidebar. Uh, when we and Daniel is a great example, especially for those that have certain status and get certain positions within our captivity. Daniel always looked out for his people. Even when you read in chapter 4, where we read earlier, where he told Nebuchadnezzar, "Hey, listen, you need to repent, turn from your transgressions, and how you do that is by showing mercy unto the poor, showing mercy unto the Israelites, those that were scattered amongst that captivity." But here we read a whole nother king is going to Daniel saying, if you can interpret this, I'll make you third ruler of the kingdom. Remember, under Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel was set up. Matter of fact, let's jump back over there to chapter 2 real quick. Chapter 2 and verse 48. It says, right, verse 47. The king answered unto Daniel and said, of a truth it is that your God is a God of gods and the Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets, seeing thou couldst reveal this secret. Then then the king made Daniel a great man and gave him many gifts, many great gifts, made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief of the governor over all the wise men. So Daniel was already set up as a ruler over the kingdom of Babylon. But when you get, by the time you get to Belshazzar, those kings didn't recognize that. Same thing, similar what you read with Joseph, as a new pharaoh came who remembered not Joseph, and things of that nature. Because at the end of the day, we were still slaves in this kingdom. We were still children of the captivity. I know a lot of times our people in this captivity today lose sight of that. We get certain rank and we get certain position of quote unquote authority, and we lose sight that we still children of the captivity. We still slaves in this nation. Uh, so Daniel is a good example of how to move when you have position and status. But let's go back to chapter 5 or 16. But showing you that this king didn't recognize his rulership that was set up by Nebuchadnezzar. Because right here he's telling them, if you can interpret this, I'll make you the third ruler of the kingdom. Watch this. Verse 16 again. Chapter 5, verse 16. And I've heard of thee that thou canst make interpretations and dissolve doubt. Now, if thou canst read the writing, make known to me the interpretation thereof, thou shalt be clothed with scarlet, and have a chain of gold about thy neck. Thou shalt be the third ruler in the kingdom. Verse 17. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, let thy gifts be to thyself, and give thy reward to another. Yet I will read the writing unto the king, and make known to him the interpretation. So he told Belshazzar, listen, you can keep your reward and you can give it to another. But I'm gonna let you know the interpretation. Because remember, at this point, Daniel had already seen the visions. He understood what was supposed to happen. He understood what was supposed to take place. Uh okay, watch this. So let's read on. We'll go to that in a second. Let's read on. Verse 18. It says, O king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar, thy father, a kingdom, majesty, and glory and honor. And for the majesty that he gave him, all people, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he would he slew, and whom he would he kept alive, and whom he would set up, and whom he would be put down. And whom he would, he set up, and whom he would, he put down. But when his heart was lifted up, his mind hardened in pride, he was disposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. That was talking about the pride. He lifted himself up, read in chapter 4, and God made him base. Verse 21. And he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like beasts, and his dwelling was like the wild asses. They fed him with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with dew. Oh, yeah. And his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High God ruled in the kingdom of men, and he appointed over it whomsoever he will. Thou his son, O Belshazzar, has not humbled thine heart, though thou knewest all of this. He said, you ain't humbled your heart, though you knew all of this. Verse 23, but has lifted up thyself against the Lord of heaven, and they have brought the vessels of his house before thee, and thou and thy lords, thy wives, and thy concubines have drunk wine out of them. Meaning you knew all this about Nebuchadnezzar, your father, but you still done and didn't humble yourself, but lifted up yourself against the Lord of heaven by bringing in the vessels out of his house, basically bringing in the vessels that were brought from the temple and drinking wine out of them to your gods. Where's we at? We drink wine out of them, and thou hast praised the gods of silver and gold, of brass, iron, wood, and stone, which see not nor hear, nor hear, nor know, and the God in whose hand thy breath is, and whose are all thy ways, hast thou not glorified. Then was the part of the hand sent from him, and this writing was written. That hand was sent from God. Verse 25, and this is the writing that was written. Mene, tekel, farsin. This is the interpretation of the thing. Mene. God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. That number was 70 years. That's what we read in Jeremiah. Verse 27, Tekel, thou art weighted in the balance and are found wanting. Thou art weighted in the balance and found wanting. That goes, he took them uh, vessels of gold and of silver from the Lord's temple and drunk wine out of it to his gods of gold and silver and things of that nature. Verse 28. It says, Perez, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Verse 29. Then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet, and put a chain of gold about his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him, that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. And that night was Belshazzar, king of the Chaldeans, slain. So that night, once the interpretation was given, Daniel made known the understanding of the writing on the wall. That night, the Babylonian king was slain. Verse 31. And Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. So, right here in Daniel, the 5th chapter was the fall of Babylon, instituting uh, the Median and Persian kingdom. Because as you read up in verse 28, it puts the Medes first because they were the more powerful kingdom at the time, but eventually Persia rose up. What we read in Daniel 8, where it says that the one horn became higher, and the higher horn came last. Uh, so now watch this. Let's jump over to chapter. Before we read chapter 6, let's go to chapter 9, real quick. This is Daniel, the 9th chapter, and the first verse. It says, in the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, of the seed of the Medes, which was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by books the number of the years, whereof the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah the prophet. Because remember, the interpretation of the sentence in chapter 5, it says, God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Here in chapter 9, Daniel understood by books the number of the years, whereof the word of the Lord back in Daniel 9 and 2. In the first year of his reign, I Daniel understood by books the number of the years, where whereof the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the destruction of Jerusalem. So that's what we're reading in Daniel 7, 5 and verse 31, where it says that night Darius took the kingdom. That was 70-year mark, and the kingdom was Babylon was destroyed. Now let's go. Chapter 6, Daniel chapter 6, verse 1. All right. So Daniel chapter 6 and verse 1. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes, which should be over the whole kingdom. So now you have Darius. Keep in mind, remember, this was two a two government kingdom, two-pronged kingdom, similar to what you see today in America. And as we get to Esau and his kingdoms, you're going to see similarities where Esau pulled from a lot of these kingdoms certain attributes of them. That's why when you get to Revelations, I believe it's 13, where it says the beast was like a leopard and a bear. It's going into, like, here you read about the Persian and Mede. They were a two-pronged government, two kingdom empire, similar to what you see today in America. You have the Democrats and Republics. You have two-pronged government. So here you have Darius, who was the king of the Medes. Also, you had in Ezra 1, which we're going to get to it, hopefully, if we have time today, might be in part 2, was set up the king of the Persians, who was set up. Basically, they were two kingdoms, but they had certain dominions, but they worked together as one empire. The Median and the Persians, the Medo-Persian Empire. So, Daniel chapter 6, verse 1. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes, which should be over the whole kingdom. And over these, and over these three presidents, Daniel was first, that the prince might give account of them. The king should have no damage. Then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents and princes because of an excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm. So now Daniel moves right into the Persian Median captivity, and Darius thought it good to set over the whole kingdom 120 princes, and of those princes, of those presidents, uh, and basically over those princes, he set three presidents. And of those, among those presidents and princes was Daniel. And then when you get to verse 3, it says Daniel was preferred above the presidents and the princes. So Daniel was preferred above all of them to the point to where the king thought to set him over the entire realm. Watch this, verse 4. Then the presidents and the princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom. But they could find none occasion nor fault, for as much as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. Meaning what? Daniel moved how he was supposed to move. Uh Similar to what you read in Romans the 13th chapter. They couldn't find any fault in him because he was moving, he was keeping the commandments of God and moving according to the commandments of the king that align with the commandments of God. Uh, but they sought occasion to try to get him because here it is, he was of the children of the captivity, similar to what we read in Daniel, the third chapter, with Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, where they basically envied them and sought an occasion to get them basically removed from that position. They sought an occasion against him. Watch this, chapter 5. Then said these men, we shall not find any occasion against this Daniel, except we find it against him concerning the law of his God. We're not going to be able to find no occasion against this man unless we find it against the law of his God. Verse 6, watch this. Then these presidents and princes assembled together to the king, said thus unto him, King Darius, live forever. All the presidents of the kingdom, the governors, and the princes, the counselors, and the captains have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree that whosoever shall ask a petition of any god or man for 30 days, save of thee, O king, shall be cast into the lion's den. So then they came to him crafty, basically saying, uh, hey, we want to basically establish a royal statute and firm a decree that if anybody makes any petition to any god or man, except for you, king, I will cast them into the lion's den. Watch this, verse 8. Now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing, that it be not changed according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which authoreth not. Whereof King Darius signed the writing and decree. Now, when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house and opened, and his windows being open in the chamber towards Jerusalem, kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he did aforetime. He knew, and this shows the fortitude of our forefathers, similar to you read with Shadrach, Meshach, Azariah, Hananiah, and Mishael, Daniel the same way. We not budging when it comes to the commandments of God. And it's going to come a time during this captivity, similar to you read in all captivities, where we are tried when it comes to keeping God's commandments. Because right here, it says, verse 10, now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, Daniel knew that the writing had been signed, the decree had been sent forth. Remember, he was in a position of power in this kingdom to the point to where the king wanted to set him over the whole realm. So he knew that the writing had been signed. He understood what had been decreed throughout the Median and Persian Empire. It says, now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house. Uh, it says he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber towards Jerusalem, he kneeled down upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he did aforetime. He didn't switch it up. He went and faced Jerusalem, same thing we do today, because that's what you read in Second Kings, the 8th chapter, where Solomon prayed and basically showed us how we're supposed to pray in our captivity. You face Jerusalem, face our land. Daniel did the same thing. Went to his window that was open in his chamber towards Jerusalem, got on his knees and prayed 3 times a day. Watch this, verse 11. Before that, I missed something. Before we read on, I want to jump back up to verse 5 and I'll read verse 5 again, and we're going to jump. Uh, Verse 5, it says, then said these men, we shall not find any occasion against this Daniel, except we find it against him according to the law of his God. Watch this. Let's go to Bell and the Dragon real quick. Because what we're reading in Daniel, the 6th chapter, is the same history that we're reading in Bell and the Dragon. If you was wanting to know where to put Bell and the Dragon historically, it's chapter 6 of Daniel. It's the same history. So let's go to Bell and the Dragon real quick, then we'll come back. Um, Bell and Dragon. Start at uh we'll start at verse 1, then we're gonna jump back. As we read through Daniel chapter 6, we're gonna jump between Bell and the Dragon and Daniel chapter 6. It's one of them small books get uh come on. Bell and the Dragon, verse 1. It says, and King Artaxerxes was gathered to his father. Cyrus of Persia received his kingdom. So in Daniel chapter 6, you read Darius was the king, but here in Bell and the Dragon, you read Cyrus was the king, and that's going into those two kingdoms. Remember in Daniel 8, it says it was a ram with two horns, which represented the king of Media and the king of Persia. That's what you're reading here. You're reading the king of Persia, and then you're in also in Daniel 6, you're reading the Medes. But it's the exact same history going on during the exact same time. You just had these two kings ruling at this time. Darius was the king of the Medes, and then Cyrus was set up as the king of Persia. So all this history is running concurrent. That you read in Ezra 1 and 1, where Cyrus was set up, Bel and the Dragon, Daniel the sixth chapter. All this is taking place at the same time. Bel and the Dragon, verse 1, it says, when Az- Artaxerxes was gathered to his fathers, and Cyrus of Persia received his kingdom. And Daniel conversed with the king and was honored above all his friends. The king right here that he conversed with was Darius, not Cyrus. So when you're reading this, it says, and Daniel conversed with the king. The king he conversed with was Darius. That's what we're reading in Daniel 6, where it says, and was honored above all his friends. That's what you read in verse 3 in Daniel, where it says, he was preferred above the presidents and princes, point to where the king thought to set him over the whole realm. Verse 3 says that the Babylonians had an idol called Baal, and there was spent upon him every day 12 great measures of fine flour and 40 sheep and vessels of wine. Now, when you read Daniel 6, Bel and the Dragons shed some light on why they was mad and pissed off at Daniel and why they saw occasion to try to basically find error or fault in him. Uh, and it's what we're reading in Bel and the Dragon. So watch this. Verse 5, Bel and the Dragon, verse 3 again. Now the Babylonians had an idol called Baal, and there was spent upon him every day 12 great measures of fine flour, and 40 sheep, and 6 vessels of wine. The king worshipped it, and went daily to adore it. But Daniel worshipped his own God. The king said unto him, why dost thou not worship Baal? Who answered and said, because I may not worship idols made with hands, but the living God, who hath created the heaven and earth, and have sovereignty over all flesh. Watch this. Verse 6. Then said the king unto him, thinkest thou not that Baal is a living God? Seest thou not how much he eateth and drinketh every day? So the king thought this was a living God because how much he was eating and how much food they were sending to this idol. Verse 7. Then Daniel smiled and said, O king, be not deceived, for this is but clay within and brass without, and did never eat or drink anything. So the king was wroth and called for his priest and said unto him, if ye tell me not who this is that devoureth these expenses, ye shall die. But if ye certify me that Baal devoureth them, then Daniel shall die. And Daniel shall die. And he hath spoken blasphemy against Baal. And Daniel said unto the king, let it be according to thy word. Now the priests of Baal were 70, besides their wives and children. And the king went with Daniel into the temple of Baal. So Baal's priests said, lo, we go out, but thou, O king, set on the meat and make ready the wine and shut the door fast and seal it with thine own signet. And tomorrow thou comest in, if thou findest not that Baal hath eaten up all, we will suffer death. Or else Daniel, that speaketh falsely against us. And they little regarded it, for under the table they had made a privy entrance, whereby they enter in continually and consume those things. So basically, the priest said, listen, put thy signet on the door, seal the door, put everything, the food in there, seal the door. And if you come tomorrow and the food is eaten up, uh, know that Daniel's going to get put to death. But if it ain't eaten, then Daniel was right. But the king didn't know that they had made a privy door to where they could enter in and out without going through the front door that he sealed. Watch this, verse 14. It says, so when they were gone forth, the king set meats before Baal. Now Daniel had commanded his servants to bring ashes, and those that strolled throughout all the temple in the presence of the king alone. Then went they out and shut the door and sealed it that with the king's signet, and so departed. So Daniel, with his wisdom and understanding, had his servants go and put ashes on the floor, sprinkle ashes throughout all the floor. Watch this, verse 15. Uh yeah, verse 15. It says, now in the night came the priests and their wives and children. So they were wont to do, as they were wont to do, as they did in previous times, and did eat and drink all. In the morning betime, the king arose, and Daniel with him. The king said, Daniel, are the seals whole? And he said, yea, O king, they be whole. And as soon as he opened the door, the king looked upon the table and cried with a loud voice, great art thou, O Baal, and with thee is no deceit at all. Then laughed Daniel and held the king that he should not go in, and said, behold, now the pavement, and mark well whose footsteps are these. So, and this is where you gotta bring yourself there. You can't just read it like words on a page. Here it is. Daniel wake up, the king wake up, they go to the temple. The king asks, hey Daniel, is the door still sealed? Daniel's like, yeah, it's still sealed. So they go in, and the king looks at the table and sees all the food gone. He starts praising Baal, and then Daniel just laugh at him. He's like, he said, before you get ahead of yourself, look at the floor, look at the pavement, and you tell me whose footsteps these are. Verse 20. And the king said, I see footsteps of men, women, and children. And then the king of anger. So now he look at the ground. He's like, wait a minute. I see footsteps of men. I see women. I see children. You gotta think there's big footsteps like boots. Then you got little footsteps of kids, and then medium size that look like a woman's shoe. Because remember, he sprinkled ashes everywhere, so you got footprints that are in these ashes. Verse 21. And took the priest with their wives and children, who showed him the privy doors, wherein they came in and consumed such things as were upon the table. Therefore the king slew them and delivered Baal into Daniel's power, who destroyed him and his temple. And in that same place that was a great dragon, which they of Babylon worshiped. So he went through and just basically he gave that idol into Daniel's power, and Daniel destroyed it because basically the king was made a fool of by the princes and priests. So now watch this. Let's go back. So now we go back to Daniel 6. You have some more understanding as to why they was trying to find occasion for Daniel and why they was pissed and mad at Daniel. But we're gonna go back to Daniel 6. We're gonna read verse 4 again, and we'll jump back down. Daniel 6, verse 4 says, then the presidents and priests sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could find none occasion nor fault. For as much as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. Because here with the dragon, they couldn't find fault with him. Uh, and so they had to basically conjure up a lie to try to find fault with him concerning his God, concerning the law of his God. And they knew the law of his God, that he could not worship idols. That's what we read in Bell and the Dragon. Because in Bell and the Dragon, when you go back, he basically said, back in Bell and the Dragon, uh verse 5, it says, who answered and said, because I may not worship idols made with hands, but the living God, who hath created the heaven and the earth, and have sovereignty over all flesh. They understood that and knew that. That's why when you get back to Daniel chapter 6, they said, we can't find no fault with him. So we got to find we gotta find a fault or find something against him concerning the law. Is God. So now let's go back to um Daniel chapter 6. We're gonna jump back down to verse 11. So, verse 11, it says, Daniel 6 and 11, it says, then these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. Because remember, they went to Darius and got a decree that no one for 30 days, no one should make any supplication to any god or man except the king. And that decree went out. Daniel, knowing this, he still went and prayed towards Jerusalem. Uh, 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 and gave thanks before God as he had always done. Verse 12, it says, then they came near and spake before the king concerning the king's decree. Hast thou not signed a decree that every man that shall ask a petition of any god or man within 30 days, save thee, O king, shall be cast into the lion's den? Then the king answered and said, the thing is true, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which altereth not. Because remember, they had this decree drafted up. And this is where Esau pulls for its democracy and things of that nature. These presidents and princes basically came together to drafted a law, drafted a law for the king, and then they had the king to sign it into law. So once the king signed it, it basically became a part of the Median and Persian law, which you can't alter it. Then they came and said, "Ha, we got it. Look, king, didn't you write this decree? Didn't you sign this into power?" And he said, "True, and it can't be altered." Verse 13. Then answered they and said before the king. Then answered they and said before the king. Lost my spot. Yeah, verse 13. Then answered they and said before the king, that Daniel, which is of the children of the captivity of Judah, regardeth not thee, O king, nor the decree that thou hast signed, but maketh his petition 3 times a day. Then the king, when he heard these words, was sore displeased with himself, and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. And he labored to the going down unto the sun to deliver him. So this thing made the king heavy because Daniel had a good report with the king. Remember, we read earlier to the point to where he wanted to set him over the whole realm. Even when you read in Bell and the Dragon, you can see the relationship that Daniel and the king that Daniel had with the king. Because remember, Daniel was laughing in his face. You read multiple times where the king would say something and Daniel would laugh. Yeah, okay, king. Uh, remember when they walked into the seal and the king was praising Baal and Daniel laughed. Like, yeah, okay. Look at the flow. So Daniel had a certain relationship with the king. Uh, and when the king heard this concerning Daniel, he was troubled to the point to where it displeased him to the point to where he made it his business to try to save Daniel. And basically what he was doing, he was trying to find some type of loophole, some type of way out of the decree that was written. Watch this. Read verse 14 again. Then the king, when he heard these words, was sore displeased with himself and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. He set his mind on Daniel to deliver him, and he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. The laboring was him trying to find something in the law of the Persian and Medes, to be able to deliver Daniel. Watch this, verse 15. It says, now these men assembled unto the king and said unto the king, know, O king, that the law of the Medes and the Persians is that no decree nor statute which the king established may be changed. That's what he was trying to find. That's what he was laboring. Similar to what you see today with democracy in America, how their law is set up, and they try to find loopholes. You have lawyers set in place when you go to trial to try to find loopholes in the law to get you out of certain things that break. That similar to what we're reading here with the Mede and Persians. Esau pulled a lot of their how they set and base their government uh based off what we're reading here, the Persians and the Medes. So that's what the king was doing. He was laboring to try to look find in the law of the Medes and the Persians that would deliver Daniel. Similar to what lawyers do today, when someone might break a law, something might happen, and then they find other laws or loopholes, quote unquote, that will uh basically get you out of whatever it is that you might be in charge for, or it might be a civil matter you might be sued for, things of that nature. That's what the king was doing here. But the men assembled themselves together and came to the king and just let him know, like, hey, listen, I understand what you're doing, but no, the law of the Persian and Mede is that no decree nor statute which the king established can be changed, may be changed. So watch this, verse 16. It says, then the king commanded and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. So the king commanded, they took Daniel and they cast him into the lion's den. So watch this. Let's go to Bell and the Dragon verse. Let's go back to Bell and the Dragon. But let's jump down to verse 29. Matter of fact, we can read off from where we left off, but 29 is going into what we're reading here, where he was delivered into the lion. But we're gonna read because more things took place. Verse 23. Dead Bell and the Dragon, verse 23. It says, therefore the king slew them and delivered Bel into Daniel's power. That's what we read earlier. The king slew all those priests of Baal and their women and their children, and then gave that idol into Daniel's power, and he destroyed him and the temple. Verse 23. And in the same place there was a great dragon, which they of Babylon worshiped. Now there was another idol that they worshiped. There was a dragon. Verse 24. And the king said unto Daniel, wilt thou also say that this is of brass? Lo, he liveth and eateth and drinketh. Thou canst not say that he is no living God. Therefore worship him. Then said Daniel unto the king, I will worship the Lord my God, for he is the living God. But give me leave, O king, and I shall slay this dragon without sword or staff. The king said, I give thee leave. Then Daniel took pitch and fat and hair and did sieve them together and made lumps thereof. This he put in the dragon's mouth, and so the dragon burst in sunder. And Daniel said, lo, these are the gods ye worship. So not only did he have Baal destroyed, but he had the dragon destroyed. And this sheds more light as to why these men were so mad and pissed at Daniel, and how Daniel found favor amongst the king Darius, the king of Persia. I mean, the king of Mede, the Median king. Verse 28. When they of Babylon heard that, they took great indignation and conspired against the king, saying, the king is become a Jew, and he hath destroyed Baal, he hath slain the dragon, and put the priest to death. So they came to the king and said, deliver us, Daniel, or else we will destroy thee and thine house. What you're reading is what you read in Daniel. That's when them coming to him saying, hey, listen, they made that covenant together. They came and had that decree put into law, and then they came to the king and was like, hey, listen, you know that ain't no, this was how they was going to destroy the king's house if he didn't deliver unto Daniel, because the law was no decree that was established can be changed by the king. You can't change it. Once a king signs it into law, it cannot be changed. So now, Bell and the Dragon, verse 29 again. It says, so they came to the king and said, deliver us, Daniel, or else we will destroy thee and thine house. Now, when the king saw that they pressed him sore, being constrained, he delivered Daniel unto them, who cast him into the lion's den where he was 6 days. Because they was pressing him. Because remember, you read in Daniel, it was his mind, he set his heart to deliver Daniel from being cast into the lion's den. Um, so the kings, they came pressing him, and how they pressed him with the Persian and Mede law. So now let's go back to Daniel 6 and verse 16 again. It says, then the king commanded, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spake and said unto Daniel, thy God thy God whom thou servest continually, he will deliver thee. So the king, he basically he had to cast him into the den because he was being pressed, and they was going to destroy the men was going to destroy his house because the law of the Medes and Persia, it cannot be changed once it's established. So the king had Daniel thrown into the lion den, but he spake unto Daniel. He spake unto Daniel. Excuse me. He spake unto Daniel and basically told him, the God whom thou servest continually, he will deliver thee. Because what's the continually? Reading Bell and the Dragon. You had Bell come up and the king's like, not gonna serve him. And then he showed that he was an idol. He said, no, I'm gonna serve the one true living God. And then he made mockery of that God. Then the dragon came and he says, you're not gonna, this dragon's fake too? He said, yeah, give me leave and I'll destroy this dragon without sword, without hands, without anything. And guess what? He made mockery of that dragon as well, of that idol as well. So here the king was persuaded. He understood that, okay, yeah, you serve the one true living God. And here he told him, he went and told, hey, listen, the God, thy God whom thou servest continually, he will deliver thee. Watch this, verse 17. It says, and a stone was brought and laid upon the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of of his lords, that the purpose might not be changed according that the purpose might not be changed concerning Daniel. Watch this. Let's jump back to Veil and the Dragon. So he was thrown into the lion's den, and the king sealed it with a signet that the purpose might not be changed concerning Daniel. So now let's go back to Bill and the Dragon. Let's read verse 30, verse 31 again. It says, who cast him into the lion's den, where he was 6 days. And in the den there were 7 lions, and they had given them every day 2 carcasses and 2 sheep, which then were not given to them to the intent they may devour Daniel. So he was cast into the lion's den, and he was only in there for 6 days. Um, and these lions, they had prepped and prepared them to devour Daniel. Before times they were given what it says, they were given 2 carcasses and 2 sheep to feed them, but they weren't given that to the intent that they would devour Daniel. So these lions were extra hungry. They were starving to the point to where when they threw Daniel in there, they assumed that Daniel would be devoured because these lions were hungry. Watch this. Verse 33. Now there was in Jewry a prophet called Habakkuk, who made pottage and had a broken bread in a bowl, and was going into the field for to bring the reapers. Watch this. Hold on. I want to jump. I want to jump back. No. We'll continue reading. Verse 33. It says, now there was in Jewry a prophet called Habakkuk, who had made pottage and had broken bread in a bowl, and was going into the field for to bring it to the reapers. But the angel of the Lord said unto Habakkuk, go carry the dinner that thou hast unto Babylon, unto Daniel, who is in the lion's den. So Daniel was cast in the lion's den. It was sealed. He was in there for 6 days. He hungered. So the angel of the Lord came to Habakkuk, who was still in Jerusalem. Because remember, during the Babylonian captivity, they left the poor of the sort to till the land. That's why he was out in the field with the reapers, like we said right before time. So the angel of the Lord came into Habakkuk and said, hey, listen, take thy dinner and carry it unto Babylon, unto Daniel. Watch this, verse 35. And Habakkuk said, Lord, I never saw Babylon, neither do I know where the den is. Because Habakkuk had never been to Babylon. But why? Why? Because he wasn't taken captive with the rest to Babylon. He remained and stayed in Jerusalem the entire time. Even after the fall, he was still there. He was left. Verse 36, watch this. It says, then the angel of the Lord took him by the crown and bare him by the hair of his head, and through the vehemiousy of his spirit set him in Babylon over the den. Damn, that's some heavy stuff right there. Angel snatched him up by his head and boom, basically teleported him to the lion's den and dropped him right there by the lion by over the den, because you could see in the den. Uh he basically set him over the den to where he could see in. Verse 37, watch this. And Habakkuk cried, saying, because think about it. Here it is, you a prophet there, and you going out to till the field. Next thing you know, an angel of the Lord pop up and tell you, hey, go to Babylon, take that dinner to Babylon, to Daniel, who's in the lion's den in Babylon. You tell the angel, I don't know the way to Babylon. I've never seen it, nor have I ever been there. The next thing you know, foof, boom, you popping you before you outside of the den. So put your mind with Habakkuk. He like, oh shoot. That's why I said, and Habakkuk cried. He like, hey, Daniel, oh Daniel, take the dinner which God have sent thee. Because because one moment he was in Jerusalem, next thing, poof, he was in Babylon over the den. That's heavy right there. Uh, verse 38. And Daniel said, thou hast remembered me, O God. Neither hast thou forsaken them that seek thee and love thee. So Daniel arose and did eat, and the angel of the Lord set Habakkuk in his own place again immediately. That's how you know it was fast. It was poof. He was from Jerusalem to the from Jerusalem to Babylon over the lion's den. And once he gave the food to him, poof, he was set back immediately back in the field. There was a movie that Esau, he tries to somewhat depict certain powers like this. It was a movie called Jumper, where they would they would jump from one place to the other. That's similar to what we're reading here, where the angel just snatched him up through the vehemency and teleported to the next place, set him there, and then poof, set him back immediately again. Watch this, verse 40. It says, upon the seventh day, the king went to bewail Daniel. And when he came to the den, he looked in, and behold, Daniel was sitting. So now, watch this. Let's jump back. Uh, so this is what all took place while Daniel was in the den. We had Habakkuk come, drop the food off for him, and the lions didn't touch him. That's what we're about to read now. So go back to Daniel 6 and verse 18. Verse 18. Then the king went to his palace. After Daniel was sealed in, it says the king went to his palace and passed the night fasting. Neither were instruments of music brought before him, and and his sleep went from him. So basically, the king was distraught because he cared for Daniel. He had a certain relationship with Daniel. And in his mind, he thought Daniel was about to get devoured and eaten by lions. So he went back, he didn't eat anything. He fasted. There wasn't no music playing, and he couldn't sleep. Verse 19. It says, verse 19. It says, then the king arose very early in the morning and went and hasted into the den of lions, and he came. And it says, and he came to the den, and he cried with a lamentable voice unto Daniel. And the king spake and said to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God, whom thou servest continually, able to deliver thee from the lions? So that's what we just read in Bell and the Dragon, verse 40, where it says, on the seventh day the king went to bewail Daniel. That's what it says, verse 20, and verse 19, then the king arose very early in the morning. That was on the seventh day, after Daniel had already been in there for 6 days. And he ran lamenting. That's where you read in Bell and the Dragon, where it says he went to bewail Daniel. So he came lamenting and basically said, he cried unto him, said, is your God able to save thee from the mouth of basically deliver thee from the lions? Verse 21, it says, and Daniel said unto the king, O king, live forever. My God hath sent his angel and have shut the lion's mouth. That's that angel we just read in Bell of the Dragon. It says God has sent his angels and shut the lion's mouth. Also, that angel had Habakkuk bring Daniel food. It says my verse 22, my God have sent his angel and have shut the lion's mouth, that they have not hurt me, for as much as before him in innocency, innocency, yeah, Sometimes words be getting me. It says, innocency was found in me, and also before thee, O king, have I done no hurt. Then the king then was the king exceedingly glad for him, and commanded that they should take Daniel out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no manner of hurt was found upon him, because he believed in his God. Now watch this. Let's go back to the Bell and the Dragon, verse 41, where we left off. So between 40 and 41, this is what took place, where he went to lament. He asked Daniel if he was still alive. Daniel spake and basically told him that God had delivered. God sent his angel to shut the mouth of the lions and deliver him. Back to Bill and the Dragon, verse 40 and 41 again. It says, upon the seventh day, the king went to bewail Daniel. Came to the den, he looked in, and behold, Daniel was sitting. Then cried the king with a loud voice, saying, great art thou, O Lord God of Daniel, and there is none other beside thee. Watch this. Let's jump back to the Bell and the Dragon, chapter 6, now verse 24. And the king commanded, and you can write in your Bible, you can take these notes because these verses that we're reading coincide with what we're reading at Bell and the Dragon. Verse 24. And the king commanded, and they brought those men which had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the den of the lions, them, their children, and their wives. And the lions had the mastery of them, and break all their bones in pieces, or ever they came at the bottom of the den. So now they threw all those that had accused Daniel, their wives and children. And you read it all the time. The wives get thrown in there with the children because everyone's in cahoots. So all of them got thrown in there. Uh, and the angel opened them. Basically, the angel that had stopped the mouth for Daniel didn't do that for them. And these hungry lions had the mastery of them. Basically, broken pieces devoured them. Let's go back. Bell and the Dragon, verse 42. It says, and he drew him out and cast those that were the cause of his destruction into the den. That's the same thing we just read in chapter 6, verse 24, where it says they cast those that had accused him, that caused his destruction. It says, and he drew them, verse 42 again, and he drew him out and caused those that were and cast those that were the cause of his destruction into the den, and they were devoured in a moment before his face. That's what's going into what it says the lions had mastery of them. They were devoured in a moment. The moment they was thrown in there, the lions devoured them. Back to Daniel 6. We almost done. Daniel 6 and verse 25. It says, then King Darius wrote unto all people, nations, and languages that dwelt in all the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. I make a decree that every dominion of my kingdom, men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God and steadfast forever. And his kingdom that which shall not the and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. His dominion shall be even unto the end. Delivereth and rescueth, and worketh signs and wonders in heaven and in earth, who have delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. So there was a decree that went out, basically saying that all those that all men should tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. And God prospered during the reign of Darius and Cyrus the Persian. And all of this is going to play a factor when we get to the other side of the Persian kingdom under Cyrus, when we were released and many of us went back to Jerusalem to help build. Uh, that coincided during the same time here. So remember, this decree was put out throughout all the kingdom of Persia and Mede, that everyone should tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. Also, you had Cyrus who put out a decree that released us to go back and rebuild the temple and rebuild Jerusalem. So we're gonna stop it right there, and we're gonna pick up next time in part two, Ezra's 1, dealing with Cyrus and Ezra and Nehemiah. So all praise to the Most High God. I pray y'all got some understanding. I know it went a little longer today, But all praises be to the Most High God. I pray I got some understanding. Shalom. Most High in Christ bless.